Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Spyderco Knives Paysan. Now, I got a couple of different thank yous to say here. To start with, thanks to my patrons. Because at a certain point, I didn't think Spyderco was going to be able to get me one of these guys, and so I just went ahead and I ordered one from Knife Joy online. They sent it my way. Actually, the day before it got there from them, Spyderco sent one along. Unannounced, I don't get even shipping notifications. I just get it showed up. And so Spyderco also did send me one of these guys. This is the one I bought from Knife Joy, the one I got from Spyderco's with Slicey Dicey right now. Spread the love, you know. But nevertheless, I told Spyderco that I'm talking about the good, the great, bad, the ugly, might be a gem, might be a junk. Nevertheless, I'm doing my best not to let that affect my review and whatnot. But actually, the one you see on the table here is direct from, it's a purchase that I made on my own thanks to my patrons. So, there you go. And then actually, as another aside, Spyderco mistakenly sent me another Paysan afterwards due to a shipping mix-up. So I've actually had 3 of these in my hands, which will come into play a little bit later on. But anyways, there you go. Next thing, size comparison. This is a big knife. Here it is against your Ontario Rat number 2 and your Spyderco Delica. Yeah, this is a big one. Absolutely 100%. Here it is against your PM2. And again, if we look at the blade length, yeah, big. Absolutely a large knife. And then here it is against a couple of other Spydercos. Here it is against my personal favorite Spyderco, the Spyderco Sleeve Bowie, which I freaking love. As many of you are aware, it's discontinued and whatnot, but it actually has a similar feeling of overall quality in terms of machining and whatnot to this guy. Here it is against the Spyderco Peter Rassenti Nirvana. Now, mind you, this has been reground. This is not the original factory blade. The original blade was much thicker, and yeah, the saber grind and whatnot. This has been reground by Joshua Razor Edge Knives. It gives you a size, a sense of the overall size. Then finally, here it is against the Spyderco Spidey Chef, just so you can kind of get a sense of things. So anyways, there's your size comparisons. Next thing, a couple of quick things that are different from stock on this guy. To start with, this is not the factory clip. This is a deep carry clip from Casey Lynch, Lynch Northwest, whatever his name effectively is. The original clip is just this basic Spyderco spoon-style clip. It works fine, but I do like the deeper carry, so I switched over to this Lynch clip. And then also the edge on this guy is not factory. I put this edge on after the fact using my KME system because I wanted to try and thin that edge out a little bit more than I did. And so there you go. Or then it was to start with, that is. So there you go. Then finally, quick note, this is much like its older brother, the Nirvana, a production version of a Peter Rassenti custom knife. In this case, it's a production version of the Paysan design. So there you go. Keep that in mind. And we're going to be playing with that difference between custom and production over and over again during this review. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, the ugly of this very interesting knife here. So to start with, on the good side, it has a very non-obtrusive lanyard hole. Mind you, if you're using super thick material, it might not get through there, but you can see here that there is a lanyard hole built into this guy in such a way that it is present, but it's probably not going to matter to roughly anybody. So the lanyard lobby can get something for him, but the rest of us don't have to give a damn. So that's the very best thing you can say about a lanyard hole is I don't care. Next thing, this has some major improvements in construction relative to the Nirvana. And I say major, not that the Nirvana was a bad knife. This is a part of my permanent collection here, especially with that regrind. But it is definitely, for instance, the blade finish is a lot nicer. The original one was very blasted. Again, this is aftermarket finish up here. The overall construction, this guy had a crazy tight lock bar tension. This guy dials that back a little bit. This guy has no lock bar insert or anything like that, and no over travel stop, which on an integral knife is always a little scary, because if you accidentally press the lock bar out too far in that direction, you could bend it without the ability to rebend it, because it is an integral knife. Like the original one, this is a single piece of titanium there. But this guy has a lock bar insert with over travel stop and everything in there. That's a very nice thing. This guy, the Paysan that is, also has a beautiful detent ball ramp. It's much more nicely done, that is, than the original one. So that's good. And just overall, I think the fit and finishing, the dressing of the knife is just better. I think it just works better, and frankly, the blade geometry is a little nicer, although I still have my gripes, of course. So there are some major improvements from the Nirvana. It's very clear that Spyderco took the Nirvana and they learned a couple of lessons from it, and, it kept moving, and so that's a great thing. Next thing, once you throw this deep carry clip on there, although even with the original one, this carries very nicely, because in practice, it's not that huge. I mean, it's huge in the sense of blade length. It's legally huge. But in terms of thickness, it's not crazy. I mean, the knife itself is relatively thin, and the Spyderco Delica is, you know, a not so dissimilar thickness here, and it's not all that long either. And especially with this deep carry clip here, this doesn't carry all that much shallower than the, all that much deeper and bigger than the Delica itself. So this actually just disappears in the pocket pretty substantially. It's a little heavy, whatever, but, you know, it works great. And so the carry on this guy, particularly with the deep carry clip, is great. Next thing, the action on this guy is very, very nice in a lot of ways. It has just an amazing drop shot action. This has a smoothness that is really unparalleled, I think, in Spyderco's lineup. This is perhaps the smoothest knife Spyderco has ever put out in terms of drop shot it through. Part of that is because this blade is really thick and heavy, but part of that is just well done. It's a well done knife, and so it's got that very much. And then the flick on this guy, deployment is very easy. I mean, you can, of course, use your thumb to guide it out very slowly, but in practice, most of the time what I did is I just did that. I used my index finger and maybe a little bit of wrist there and popped this guy loose. The wrist, more than anything, is just to overcome the detent. So, or the lack of detent, I suppose, make sure it deploys completely. So, it absolutely beautiful, easy to deploy sort of action. You will occasionally get a missed flick or something like that, but yeah, that's definitely nice. Next thing, this has a blade that is very nice. It is a CPM S90V blade, and as we know, there's more to, you know, steel than chemistry, but at the same time, that's pretty good chemistry. It is a sheep's foot style blade, which can be very useful for a lot of folks, although it is all belly. So if you need flat surface, that's not great. It has a great sharpening choil down here, which, by the way, also serves, and it took me a little while, embarrassingly long, to figure this out. Remember I talked about the beautiful drop shotty action? That's actually scary in some cases, but in this case, what you've got here is an unsharpened area all the way down in the bottom here. And so when you actually close this guy, as long as your finger's in here, it's going to hit this unsharpened area down here, which allows you to get your hand out of the blade there. So even in a situation where you're, you know, for instance, bouncing around to something in a car, it's relatively easy to close this guy safely because you just put your thumb there as you're unlocking it, and you're not at any risk. It's not going to accidentally close on your finger. That's a nice little touch, but it's a good, I mean, it's great. And it serves as a very nice sharpening choil here. They've also done a beautiful mirror wash on this guy with all smooth edges and whatnot, good jimping. Just overall, this is well, I'm getting ahead of myself there. So, to me at least, that all is the good. As a very nice blade with a sheep's foot overall profile, S90V steel, great sharpening choil, which also serves as a convenient place to catch your finger as you are closing this guy. It has an amazing action. It carries great with the deep carry clip. It has major improvements relative to the Nirvana in terms of lock bar inserts over travel stops, blade finish, blade geometry, etc., and a non-obtrusive lanyard hole, and frankly, yeah, just carries very nicely. This has been a good tool for me. I mean, it's an expensive tool, it's a crazy tool, but it's a good one. Every day I've carried it, I've just kind of enjoyed it. So, anyways, that's good, but amorphous. On the great side, this is beautifully made. So the big deal, the big situation, the crazy part about this knife in a lot of ways is the integral design. Most knives, like for instance your Spyderco Sleeve Bowie, this little guy right here, is made of a sandwich style construction where you've got a blade, you've got a scale, and then you've got something in the middle here, in this case a little bit of G10. Or, you know, here on the Spyderco Spidey Shaft, you got, you know, handle, standoff, handle, and blade in the middle there. This guy is done differently. This is milled from one solid chunk of titanium. You have titanium, same chunk of titanium, same chunk of titanium. One continuous chunk. And in fact, even the stop pin in there is, they've had to make it, drill this out, and then add a stop pin in, and then sand it down perfectly later. You might just be able to see. If I put the right light angle on it, there is a very slight little crescent right there where they put the stop pin in and then sanded it clean. But oh my God, is this nicely done. And the actual machining on this guy is beautifully smooth. The finish is great. The contouring on it is a beautifully contoured handle as well. And it's a very subtle sort of an approach. That's really nice. It is also perfectly scented. Look, this is the Spyderco Taichung Taiwan factory. They are making, if not the best Spydercos, some of the best Spydercos. Golden might be excelling them in some ways, but holy crap, is this pretty. This is just a really, really nice knife. I mean, it's beautifully made. If we look at the blade, for instance, has this amazing mirrory blade finish on this guy. thing. You can see here, just absolutely gorgeous blade finish, and the engraving on it is super crisp. This is a finish, you know, along the lines of what you see on like your Sleege Bowie here, where it's just great. And in fact, if I clean it off a little bit, do I have a microfiber around here somewhere? Either way, it is just an absolutely gorgeous finish, and it's something that really needs to be held to be held. I guess that's why the word held is in there, right? But anyways, yeah, see, if I clean that off, it gets even smoother. That's nice. So I just love the way that this thing is built. It's just great, and it locks up totally solidly. It's just a spectacularly made knife. In terms of actual production knife making, this may be the nicest thing that Spyderco has ever made. It is just a tour de force from the Taichung plant, and there were some little issues here and things to be fixed, but oh my God, is this well done. So generally speaking, it's just amazingly made, and to me at least, that's what's great. And all the surfaces are chamfered and whatnot. The jimping here is crowned, it's rounded off on the top there. The inside of the Spidey hole is beautifully chamfered. It's just well done. So, to me, that's what's great, is that this is probably the most beautifully made Spyderco ever. And that's a beautiful thing. On the bad side, the price on this guy is definitely up there. It's $520. This is either super high if you were thinking about this in terms of Spyderco's lineup, or super low if you're thinking about it in terms of Peter Rassenti's lineup. I mean, I say that half jokingly, but we'll be coming back there later. Your perspective on the price largely depends on your perspective on the knife market. And so we'll talk more, but, you know, yeah, sure, I'd love it to be cheaper, but looking at it, I think it's a fair price. You can do okay here. There are a couple of things I'd like to see him tweak at this kind of price point, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Next thing, it is a little tough to get up in here and disengage this. They've scalloped off the lock a little bit here, but it's definitely one of those jam your finger in and hope for the best sorts of unlocking mechanisms, as opposed to on some other knives where they've got a little bit more kind of scoop for you. Like, for instance, Sleege Bowie here, you just put your finger in there. Pops loose, no freaking problem. Next thing, this guy is, the clip on this guy isn't super inspired. I already talked about this already. However, I want to be 100% clear about one thing. You know, a lot of people, oh my God, they just put a standard Spyderco spoon clip on there. It's a travesty. Look, yeah, that's true. But what they did is they put a standard clip on there. Unlike, for instance, the Spyderco Drunken, which had its own sort of affair, this little guy is a standard clip, which means you can use any clip that's aftermarket for your Spyderco. You can do the Lynch clip, which I really like a lot. You can get, you know, lots of people are making cool clips for these guys. So the fact that they used a standard hole pattern makes it a lot easier to find the clip that you love, even if the factory one isn't one that you do. So I would much rather have a very, very good standard clip. I'm sorry, I'd like to have a standard clip rather than, you know, a terrible, you know, milled clip or something weird like that. So I do very much like the clip. But for a lot of people, absolutely, you get it out of the box and you see this, it's like, oh, it's not quite the same as the rest of it. Whatever, though, it's a thing. Next thing, it's a little on the heavier side. It's a big freaking knife here. I forgot to measure the blade. Here, I'll measure the blade in just a second. It's 4.34 ounces for about a little under 4 inches of blade. So, you know, not terrible, but it's a little on the heavier side, and especially it's very front heavy. The balance on it is fine, it's okay, but it's definitely, you can feel that there's this big, thick freaking blade on the front of it there, and that's something to keep in mind. Unfortunately, on the bad side, and this is getting to be kind of bad, the detent on this guy is not really good. It fails any of the shake tests instantaneously. It is just not a strong detent. There are so many ways that you can open this knife just using gravity involved. The New York City police would have a freaking heyday with that. It's just not great. It's not a dangerous detent. I've had knives where the detent is just like not okay, where it's like I'm not willing to carry this for fear it'll open in my pocket. That's not what's going on here. But at the same time, the detent is definitely weak. They seem to be consistent across the three I had, but they're just not very strong. And I gotta say, the detent thing is getting really tiresome from Taichung. Spyderco makes really great stuff in Taichung, but the one thing that they don't seem to be able to do at that factory is a solid detent. And that just bugs me. Because, guys, that's an important element of a folding knife, and they need to just stop digging around with it. They are damn near the only major factory that doesn't have detent in the bag yet, and that bugs me a lot. So, the detent on this guy is a little weak. I think it would be a more compelling knife if it had a stronger detent, because it would just be all the more flickable, all the more, that would just be a little nicer. Then finally, on the bad side, the grind on this, and this is, I can't call it ugly, because then I think about everybody else in the game, but the thing is, Spyderco has set a high mark for really nice thin grinds. You know, you get things out there like, for instance, your Spyderco Sleege Bowie here. See if I can zoom in there. You can see very, very thin behind the edge there at the sharpening choil. Spyderco Spidey Chef, again, very thin behind the edge. Spyderco Drunken, super thin behind the edge. Don't have mine at the moment, but nevertheless, then we look at this guy, and it is substantially thicker behind the edge. The fact that this knife released in such close proximity to the Drunken, which was running using the same blade steel, just makes it a little disappointing. It was like having this really thick stock. Obviously, there's more to life than thick stock, but for, closed cell foam, things like that, this is a little bit too thick for that. But the fact that they didn't grind it as aggressively as the Drunken, and that this is a flat grind, by the way, not a hollow grind, which is something I'd kind of hope for. I think that would have made this a little bit more compelling. I just really do wish that they'd really put in the effort to grind this guy like freaking crazy. To put, something that would equal the Chef or the Drunken in terms of cutting power. It cuts, it's fine, and especially now that I've thinned the edge out a little bit by sharpening after the fact, and that is definitely making a difference here. The original was not even that nice, but it's disappointing to see that after the Drunken, after the Chef. I know that they can do better, and I wish they had in this, what is kind of their halo piece. So to me, that's the bad, is that the grind isn't so impressive, the detent is relatively weak, the clip isn't inspired, it's a little tough to engage, and the price is high. On the ugly front, now this is something that I really have trouble kind of knowing what to do with. There have been a number of reports on blade forums and otherwise of people with lock failures on this, where, for instance, you try and, if you try and pinch it shut, the knife will actually shut, or at least the lock will slide substantially. It's tough to say what's up with that. And look, there are always production issues with a knife of any kind. There will be quality control things, but the thing is, there seem to be a number of them. One thing I can say, well, actually two things, is everybody I've talked to seems to be, the Spyderco seems to be making it right for them. So that's the way you want to see it. But more importantly, none of the 3 different Paysans I've had have had any kind of an issue there. So look, it's hard to say. Is it the case that many of them have that issue, or is it the case that there's just a few, but they happen to be owned by people who are on blade forums? I don't know, but either way, that's not something that's okay. I don't want to see things like that ever leaving a factory, let alone on a $520 knife. So none of mine have that, so I can't vouch for this personally, but there seem to be more reports than usual of that with this particular model, and I really, really hope that's something they're looking at fixing for future iterations, if it is, in fact, something more than just an ugly production variance. And frankly, they should fix that anyways. So to me, that's what's ugly, is that there were reports of lock slip, but in none of the ones I've had has that been an issue, so I got to bring it up, but I can't lean too hard on it. So anyways, that is ugly, though, if it is true. Final conclusion. This knife is actually really weird. Review took me a long time on it, because it's a matter of 2 entirely different perspectives. I feel 2 very different ways about this pocket knife, depending on the time of day, etc. On one side, you could think about this as a production Rassenti custom. Basically, if I think about this, I just got back from Blade Show, less than a week ago. And, wandering through the tables area, where a bunch of, high-end custom makers are sitting there, selling their wares. Although the grind is a little less impressive than most custom knives, or at least most good ones, everything else about this knife is absolutely astounding from the perspective of a custom knife. The price on it is amazing for a custom. $525, or $20 that is sort of right at the low end of nice custom work. The finishing on it is amazing. The finishing is just better than most of what you see out there. The clip on it works really, really well. If you view it as frankly, if you view this knife as a custom Peter Rassenti Paysan, as a knife that is competing with other Peter Rassenti works, this is an amazing knife and amazing value. If I walked up to a random table at Blade Show and they had one of these guys sitting there without this stuff right here, I would be absolutely blown away, and I would be screaming about that maker from the rooftops, because this is a really, really good knife. However, so that's one perspective, where this is an amazing value and a very beautifully finished piece with all kinds of just astoundingness to it. If you think about it against customs, but if you think about this as a production knife, which it unquestionably is, I don't want to sound like it, then it becomes a little less impressive, because $520 puts them at the very top of the production game. They are against the very best of the best from people like We Knives, Rayot, Koenig, Chris Reeve, and otherwise. And there, if you are at $520 in the production knife game, you need to be damn near perfect. Things like detent and grind need to be on point. You need to be grinding like crazy. You need to be having a detent that is perfection, where I flick it and it's like, oh my God, I'm in love. You need to have all of those things just dialed right in. At $520 in a production CNC made knife, you need to be there. You need to be on it. And, things like lock slip are absolutely unacceptable. So if you view this knife as a top-end production knife, it's still a damn good knife. I still like the knife, but this has a couple of troubles that you don't really want to see there. $520 is a very high price for a production knife. And at that price, you need to be doing everything you're doing perfectly, and that detent and that grind are not perfect. So in that light, it's not quite as impressive. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like your feelings on the knife will come from your perspective on the knife. This is perhaps still, even with everything I've said, and by the way, I may be making some mountains out of molehills, particularly on the grind point. This is still ground better than a lot of production knives out there. But nevertheless, if you think about this as this is the nicest Spyderco that Spyderco has ever made. It is just really, really good. It is them showing off machining prowess that is better than anything they've done before. I like the Nirvana a lot, but it had some issues. This remedies those issues. I like the Sleege Bowie a lot, but this is really an even nicer piece of machining prowess. And so this is certainly a halo product for Spyderco and very, very good. And if you think about it from the custom knife perspective, it is amazing. This is it's the best production Rassenti ever. Frankly, it might even be, particularly thinking about value, this might be the best Rassenti ever. Period. I mean, this is a really, really nice knife. But those last little issues, the detent, the grind, if they're wanting to run with the very best of the very best of modern production knife making and pricing, they need to have those things on point. And so I hope there are some CQI tweaks in there, constant quality improvement, designed to make that detent a little better, designed to make that grind a little thinner, designed to make this knife just a little bit better. Because if you're wanting to run at that high price point, then you need to run hard. And this one is just a little tiny, tiny bit behind that really high-end pack. So, final conclusion, though, at the same time, I can feel all of that. I can do all of my complaining, but the fact is, I like this knife a lot. I carried this guy a lot more than I thought I might, especially once I threw on this extra clip. This is a knife that is bigger than what I generally want. It's a knife that's beefier than what I generally want. It's just, the thicker blade isn't great for some of the tasks I have on a regular basis, but by God, do I like this knife. It is really good. And so I think even as it is, even with its little foibles there, I would call this a gem. And if you were to thin the edge a little bit, put a deep carry clip on there and maybe tweak that detent, this could be absolutely amazing. If they make those little tiny tweaks, this will be at the top of the freaking game. This will be one of the best production knives just ever made, period. As it is, it's really, really good. It is a gem, but the last little tiny bit there, and at $520, those last little tiny bits do become important. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed Paysan the time watching this review, and that you don't resent me for my handling of it. And mostly, I hope that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.